Thank you, everybody. Good morning. It is great to be up here with you. Jared, thank you for the introduction. Jared is the right CEO for this organization because I had a 5-minute conversation with him, and the excitement about carbon capture and storage was just pouring forth from him. And so I know he's the right person. Don and I are happy to be with you this morning. She really wanted to come to Washington with me to hear me talk about carbon capture and storage. It had nothing to do with the opportunity to see our daughter who lives up here now. And of course, this is the Louisiana table with Senator Mary Landrieu, Hunter, whose dad, Bennett Johnson, actually nominated me to go to West Point back in 1983, and I was able to go there in 1984. So it's good to be with all of you. You know, I have a hard and fast rule. I do not leave Baton Rouge when the legislature is in session unless it is critically important. Well, the legislature is in session today, and I'm here with you in the District of Columbia because I really believe this is important. It's important for Louisiana. It's important for our country. It is important for the world. But a little bit about Louisiana. We have been more adversely affected by climate change than any other state. And that's not as subjective as it might sound. The New York Times did a study, and they published this a few weeks ago. If you go back to 1980 and you look at the cost of all natural disasters, it's not even close. Louisiana's way out there by ourselves. But more than that, we've lost more than 2,000 square miles of coast since 1930. Because of coastal erosion, but we also have sea level rise that's hitting us now. The storms are more frequent and more severe than ever. The two strongest storms ever measured in Louisiana happened in 2020 and 2021. By the way, during COVID, particularly challenging to try to manage that response. So we are being more adversely affected by climate change, and certainly other states are feeling it too, whether it's their hurricanes or their droughts or you name it, the wildfires, and managing the transition from an age of a relatively unchecked carbon footprint to a low carbon future, I believe is one of the most important things that leaders can be doing. Leaders in government, leaders in private industry, leaders in academia, non-governmental organizations, environmental organizations, you name it. And in Louisiana, we have recognized the need to take action. Not just to protect our coast, we're doing that. We have a 50-year, $50 billion plan to restore coastal Louisiana and offer more protection for the 2/3 of our citizens who actually live in southern Louisiana today. But we also want to address the root causes of climate change, particularly carbon emissions. And I think we have a special obligation to do so, not just because we're most affected by climate change, but we're contributing more CO2 on a per capita basis than just about any other country in the nation. So I'm sorry, any other state in the nation. So we have a special obligation. There's some peculiar things about us. We're the only state in the nation where more than 50% of our CO2 emissions don't come from power generation. We're very heavy in chemical manufacturing and refining. That's critically important to the state, the country, the world. But those are carbon intensive industries. And so we have to do better. And so we're going to do that. And that's why we've made a commitment to net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And we've developed a climate action plan to get us there, as Jared told you. We're the only Gulf South state with either a commitment or a climate action plan. That's how committed we are. And we are following that climate action plan. It guides our decisions and it tells us what we need to do. And it is very much in line with what Jared told you. It is an all of the above approach that we are undertaking with a real sense of urgency. Because if you have an intermediate goal by 2030, guess what? It's already 2023 and half of that year is gone. And so if you wait to deploy new technologies, and if you kind of argue about which ones you're going to do and which ones you're not going to do, 2030 is going to be here and we will not have succeeded. And then it's much more difficult to succeed with that 2050 goal as well. Now, you all know that Louisiana is well known as a traditional energy state with respect to exploration, production, and consumption. We believe Louisiana, therefore, can be a great example of how the energy transition can work and still provide the energy and the jobs that our people need. And I think Louisiana's progress and future successes are of value not only to our state, but to the wider clean energy transition efforts for all the reasons that I just mentioned. We've been an energy state, a leading energy state for more than 100 years. Simply put, if we want to be a leading energy state 30 years from now, we have to embrace the transition today. If we don't, we will be left behind. And so that's really important for our future. But we have to understand that it is indeed a transition, which by definition means you don't do it all today. We wouldn't be successful if we tried to do it all today. And that means we're going to continue to explore for and produce and consume traditional fossil fuels. And by the way, the most carbon advantaged barrel of oil anywhere in the world is in the Gulf of Mexico. We have our own environmental rules. We know we enforce them. We have a mature infrastructure. We don't have the methane emissions that other places do. And so while we're going to be dependent upon fossil fuels for some period of time, we're going to make sure that we're taking advantage of what I just told you in the Gulf. But we are going to be transitioning at the same time. And along with the electrification of our industrial processes, and by the way, as much of that electricity as possible needs to be wind and solar, renewable, carbon capture and storage is a huge part of our plan. Quite simply put, we cannot be successful. We know from our climate action plan, we cannot be successful without it. Currently, and by the way, for that reason, we are moving forward in Louisiana. Currently, there are over 20 projects that have either begun the permitting process with EPA or otherwise announced intentions to seek a Class 6 permit in Louisiana. The Louisiana Office of Conservation submitted its primacy request in the fall of 2021 after more than 2 years of preparation and coordination with EPA Region 6. My office sent a letter to the EPA administrator in January of 2022. The administrator responded with a letter and a phone meeting. The EPA at that time indicated it intended to publish. In fact, that was actually January 2023. And the EPA at that time indicated it intended to publish a proposed rule on granting Louisiana primacy in the Federal Register in May of 2023, which, as you all know, is the first step in the final process of potentially granting primacy. And I'm happy to say the EPA has met that timeline. They announced in late April that the proposed final rule would be in the Federal Register in the first week of May. The next steps include public comment period and public hearing in Baton Rouge in June, review of comments, final decision, and publishing of the final form decision in the Federal Register. So that timeline, when you boil it all down, should allow us to have primacy by the end of this year. And that is important for us because we actually have more geologists working at the Department of Natural Resources and the Office of Conservation than all of EPA Region 6, which has multiple states. So we don't just believe we can do this faster, we think we can do it better in more depth. And these geologists are very familiar with the geology in Louisiana, obviously. CCS offers a great opportunity, I think, to be a bridge between the era of relatively unchecked carbon emissions and the move toward low carbon and no carbon processes in the future. And by the way, we understand the importance of environmental justice. We are absolutely committed to it. We're baking that into everything that we do to make sure that we are successful. And that's important for our people in Louisiana. It's not just a box that we have to check when we interact with the EPA or with the Department of Energy or any other federal agency. Louisiana intends to make use of its favorable geology, the existing pipeline, the injection expertise and infrastructure that we have, the manufacturing base that we have to become a national leader in CCS projects. And we believe this is going to happen. In fact, we think it's already happening. So just to share with you quickly why Louisiana is the right place. We have thousands of miles of pipelines in place today. So we have the highest density of pipelines anywhere in the country. They're capable of moving CO2. So we have the previously, I should say, already established mature infrastructure and rights of way. And many of our rights of way have excess capacity for more pipelines. There are many available usable injection zones beneath strong confining layers, meaning we have really favorable geography. And we have a robust industrial base with many opportunities to apply carbon capture technology. Just some of them, LNG. So when you talk about LNG exports from the United States of America, you're largely talking about LNG exports from the state of Louisiana. Hydrogen, ammonia. We have the world's largest ammonia production facility. And if you think ammonia is not important, it's the key ingredient for fertilizer. It's how we feed people all over the world. We have traditional chemical manufacturing and refining that can involve carbon capture. And so you have large oil and gas companies like Exxon and Shell and others. And once you start naming names, you always leave people out. But I'm just trying to give you an example of why this is so important for us in Louisiana and what the opportunities are. So as a result of all this, the legislature in Louisiana and our regulators, we've created the necessary laws and regulations for carbon sequestration facilities, which both state and federal government have recognized as critical part of the transition to low carbon fuels and manufacturing feedstock. Since the fall of 2021, Louisiana has approved operating agreements to secure underground injection zones for 4 projects that intend to set up carbon sequestration facilities. And we recognize that CCS is not the only strategy for combating climate change, but unlike some of the others that are frequently talked about, it is mature and it's ready for market today. And we have that sense of urgency. And so we have to do what's available for us today. It's a crucial tool in the overall climate change toolbox. And I think it's a key part of the overall long-term strategy to reach net zero in carbon emissions. And I think it has the potential to be very effective in the transition from the fuels and feedstock that we have always known would come at some point in the future. For instance, CCS will play a critical role in the early part of our efforts to build out a hydrogen hub to promote low carbon production of hydrogen as an alternative energy source. And I don't know if you know this, but Louisiana, along with Arkansas and Oklahoma, we have made our final submission to be a hydrogen hub, to be awarded a hydrogen hub. It's a HALO initiative, hydrogen in Arkansas, Louisiana, and Oklahoma, very imaginative. But it's founded on the concept of building a regional hydrogen hub and requires readily available and affordable hydrogen. And this is going to be possible precisely because of CCS to support the production of hydrogen from natural gas. And we think that presents great opportunities for hydrogen production in the near term while managing carbon emissions that are associated with that. CCS supports the build out of hydrogen and puts Louisiana on a pathway to production of lower carbon intensity hydrogen, which directly contributes to emission reductions and positive community impacts. We submitted that final application to DOE for our share of the $8 billion in hydrogen funding that was made available through the bipartisan infrastructure law. DOE will, we believe, make their decisions sometime this fall, in which applications will be selected, and we feel very good about our chances. We feel very good about it. Our coast in Louisiana is a working coast. It's oil and gas, it's commercial and recreational fishing, shipping, sediment mining, and many other activities, and they all coexist. And so we are very well versed in navigating difficult issues and avoiding conflicts, getting people in the room to work together. And for generations now, the Gulf of Mexico and Louisiana have played a vital role in our nation's energy independence, our energy security, and we intend to remain, as I said earlier, an essential component of the energy supply system well into the future. And CCS is a key part of making that a reality. Now, a couple of points. I'm gonna shift away from my prepared remarks for just a second. First of all, it's always creates a little anxiety if I'm a keynote speaker in a room and everybody in the room knows more about the subject matter than I do. And I know that you all do, but I'm just going to share some thoughts. I believe climate change is real. I believe human behavior influences that. I think we have to take the sort of steps that we've just been talking about. But the surest way to fail to address global warming and climate change is to try to do too much too fast before you are able. If we forget that this is really going to be a transition, and we transition as we are able, as the science allows us to do that. We deploy technologies once they're available at scale. Because if we, for example, if we turned off our fossil fuels prematurely and we leave people in the cold and in the dark and unable to transport themselves, they're going to say to hell with it. People in this country, people elsewhere in the world. And so we're going to have to make sure that we're disciplined about what we're doing. And to be successful, we're going to have to make sure that we transition as we are able. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have a sense of urgency. We need to have a sense of urgency about all of this. And then with respect to carbon capture and storage, we have to maximize the role of science. Because when you maximize the role of science, you minimize the role of politics. And you can overcome all the NIMBYism that we're seeing wherever this is deployed. And really, it happens all over the world. We're seeing a little bit of that in Louisiana as well. And the last thing I'm going to say about this is whether I know people in Louisiana just like people elsewhere. There are some people who reject the whole notion of climate change and global warming. Other people accept that it's real. They just minimize the extent to which our behavior contributes to it. Others, they may say, oh yeah, it's real and we're doing it, but they don't want to do much about it, especially if it's going to cost another dollar or add anything that is inconvenient. And so you have people all across the spectrum, but everybody understands investment. Everybody understands economic development and job creation. And so we have approached this, our climate action plan in general, but carbon capture and storage in particular, as a real opportunity for Louisiana to attract the kind of investment and job creation that we all want for our state. And it happens to have this added benefit of allowing us to realize our climate action plan and meet our goals. And so when we talk about carbon capture and storage, the fact that these are multi-billion-dollar projects that are going to create tens of thousands of construction jobs and thousands upon thousands of permanent jobs, that is all really important, and everybody understands that. And so I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight of that. And then we talked about the bipartisan infrastructure law. Jared is exactly right about the Inflation Reduction Act. And I'm really distressed to see so many people in Congress already talking about moving away from the Inflation Reduction Act and trying to repeal certain components of it. I just came back from a trip to Korea and Japan. By the way, Louisiana has more foreign direct investment on a per capita basis than any other state in the nation. And we have for many, many years. And so we're over there talking to companies, many of whom already have a presence in Louisiana, and others who want to create a presence. And it's the IRA that created a real sense of urgency for them to come and take advantage of what we have available in Louisiana. A lot of it dealing with carbon capture and storage and the increase in that 45Q tax credit from $45 to $85. So I am from Louisiana. I can read the stop sign. I get excited about this subject matter. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you all. I hope all of you will make your way to Louisiana and find out firsthand why you should be there with your investment to take advantage of everything that I just mentioned. And thank you for what you're doing. God bless. Okay, they're just talking into taking a few questions. I always, some people say I'm happy to take questions. I reserve the right to let you know whether I'm happy after the questions are asked. Yes. Oh, on the monitor. I'm sorry, I'm supposed to read the monitor here. What message would you give to the businesses in this room about how they can best engage with communities to foster the social license needed? Wow. One of the things that we're hearing in Louisiana is that there's a concern about carbon capture where the injection is going to take place isn't where the jobs are being created. And so to the degree to which they're nervous about whether the science is there and it's really safe, they don't know why they would be burdened with a risk. And so first thing you can do is explain the science and the safety behind this, that this is not as new as many portray it to be, that it is proven, that is effective. And as the technology gets better, it's just going to get more safe. But there's some other things that we have to do too. That environmental justice is really important. I think explaining to people, so in Louisiana, we have a high concentration of refining and chemical manufacturing, as I just mentioned. Explaining to people that the process of scrubbing out of the emissions to CO2 also scrubs out other things that are not good for us, things that we would like, the SOx and the NOx. I told you I don't know as much as y'all know. But if you explain all that to people, they will, I think, have a fuller appreciation of carbon capture and how it can benefit them. And I shared this with Jaron a while ago, and I want to talk to the industry in the room. There were final investment decisions that were made when the tax credit was $45 a ton. It's now $85 a ton. You have the ability to go in and work with that local government, to work with the locals and to do some things that are really important to them as well. And I would hope that you do that to make sure that they derive as much benefit as possible from the projects that we are going to be doing. I hope that answered the question. If and when Louisiana receives Class 6 primacy, not 4, what would state time frame be for permitting new Class 6 wells? Well, I don't know what that time frame would be, but we believe it would happen faster on average than if EPA Region 6 did it for the reasons that I just mentioned. We have more geologists working. They're already familiar with our geology. And by the way, even though all the permits thus far, because we don't have primacy, have been submitted to EPA, we are concurrently going through all of those. So it's not like they're going to have to start over when we receive primacy. And so we believe we will be able to permit faster. But we're not going to permit anything unless the geology is there and the project is safe. So I don't know if, Jason, do we have a better answer than? Our folks, we have two things that are going to work together. I mentioned basically the staff. We've had 70 positions. We also could go outside for consulting. Although we're not going to hit the time frame, we feel very strongly that we can do it. Yeah. Thank you. So if you didn't hear that, we've already hired 70 more people. We can also hire outside consultants to help us process, but we don't guarantee a specific timeline. We guarantee a correct decision, and we'll permit what needs to be permitted and should be permitted, and we won't permit anything else. Am I having conversations with other governors about how they can learn from our climate action plan? I do, but quite frankly, I believe our climate action plan, our commitment to net zero, the only Gulf South state to do those things, actually gives us a competitive advantage over our neighbors. And so I like to talk to governors who are nowhere near Louisiana, but those also are the governors most receptive to the conversation. And so, no, really, we have a lot in common, for example, with Texas, the same kind of industry and so forth, but they don't have the climate action plan. And so when I'm talking to companies, and it's not just about CCS, it could be about wind or solar or whatever, with the IRA, manufacturing of potentially solar panels, whatever it is at least the fact that we have a plan and a commitment to net zero, that is a tiebreaker, at least. And I think it's actually worth a little bit more than that. But our climate action plan, it's all public, and we talk about it everywhere we go. And when we get on calls with the Department of Energy, the secretary there, or the EPA administrator, with governors, and it happens more frequently than you might think, we're always talking about our plan, because we want other governors to know, but we also want to make sure that our federal partners know. What, according to you, needs the role of state authorities in effective capture and storage of carbon? All right. Well, one of the most important things in terms of state authorities, and we're going to have this opportunity this fall, is there will be public meetings in Louisiana all about the science and the safety. And we need your help. We need your help, because if it's just state authorities who are talking about the science and the safety of carbon capture and storage, the fact that it isn't very new, it's been done in this country and around the world for a long time, and so forth. If it's only us, we're probably not going to be successful. We need folks from our universities, we need environmental organizations, and yet we need industry as well to help us make that presentation. And we're doing it this fall ahead of when we believe we will receive Class 6 primacy. And quite frankly, I wish we had done it last fall, because we have a legislative session going on, and a number of bills were filed that would try to limit where we can do carbon capture and how we would have to do it and all that sort of stuff. And at the end of the day, I think we're going to be very successful and come out of the legislative session with a really good regulatory framework in place. But we need y'all's help because there's a lot of folks out there, and it's sort of interesting how the opponents to carbon capture kind of line up. And anyway, I'm not going to get too deep into that today, but it's something that I'm asking for your help with. I know that there are companies here who are members, and they're present, and they're invested in Louisiana. You're pursuing carbon capture and storage. And so we're going to have to work together to demonstrate the science and the safety. Is that it? Okay, I am very happy to have taken questions. Those were not, I don't know if I did a good job answering them, but those are not terribly difficult, at least from my perspective. So now I will say goodbye to you and thank all of you. God bless.